YouTube. In this video, two worlds collide. The innovative world and the world of familiar places. So obviously the glass slab smartphone has reached the area of the ceiling. But nevertheless, this is the latest offering from Apple in the 15 Pro Max versus the innovative offering in the Fold 5 from Samsung. And this is gonna be a fun comparison video. Why would you make this, CJ? Because there are people who are in the Apple world that are probably seeking new, experiences with foldable devices, and this is probably piquing their interest as to something they may be considering. And likewise, there are people in the Samsung world who's seeing all of the buzz and talk about the 15 Pro Max, the wonderful cameras, the new build, the lightweight, and so forth, that are probably considering what that switch or what that world is like. So let's combine the worlds, put them head to head, and let's have a great tech discussion. Now, when we talk design, these two have very different worlds of design and innovation, but let's start off with the iPhone 15 Pro Max, which this year is rocking a new, slightly buffed hardware build with a titanium and aluminum frame structure, same frosted beautiful back glass, but now we have the rolled edges adding to the rolled and curved corners, which is just equaling a super comfortable in-hand experience. Shout out to Apple for going in that route. New camera hardware, which is we're going to talk about in this video for sure and put them head to head, and then the same old typical OLED from Apple, which is accurate as ever and, manufactured by Samsung nevertheless. But this is familiar territory when we talk iPhones with a little bit of a spice added to it. Okay, so when we get into the world of the Z Fold 5, this is innovation. This is a nice design build. Frosted glass back, matte aluminum sidings, which I appreciate. I appreciate that about both of these devices. Both sidings are non-fingerprint yielding and so forth, and they're just really nice builds. Obviously, we have those beautiful, AMOLED panels from Samsung, and the only place I feel like there's an area of improvement is camera hardware. That's going to be a place that separates these two on paper and from a technical spec sheet perspective, but in general, it's really all about the image processing. So this has that Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 in it, 817 Pro, blah, 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 right? Okay, in between these two, the next area of discussion, we can go outside, we can look at these OLED panels and see how they do in direct sunlight. All right, so now you're looking at footage out of the Galaxy Z Fold 5, getting some shots of the iPhone 15 Pro Max. I gotta be careful with the brightness that's coming into the lens. We don't have an ND filter for this system to help control the lighting, but as you guys can see, direct sunlight, iPhone 15 Pro Max is easy, very easy to see and very clear. 2000 nits of peak brightness really comes in handy. It's the brightest out. All right, so this is a ProRes 444 with Apple log shot coming out of the 15 Pro Max. I want to demonstrate how good you can see the Z Fold 5 in direct sunlight, which this is direct sunlight. As you guys can see, the sun is right there. Now, if we open it to the main display panel, this thing is beautiful and just as clear and easy and crisp to see in direct sunlight. Now, I know some people are hesitant to get into the foldable screens because of these creases, and the coating on these foldable OLEDs kind of give a very reflective character. But if you get past that, these look amazing. The color representation, the naturalness, and just the overall experience you get from this phablet size that folds down into a smartphone size. Really nice experience, especially in this day and age where innovation in the phone arena has kind of reached a plateau until you get into something like this. This is where the fun comes back into the smartphone arena. Okay, so as you guys just saw, both of these panels yield very great bright results in direct sunlight. But the reality is these two devices give a very different experience. So let's talk about the experience with the iPhone 15 Pro Max. It's the familiar experience. It's what we know and love. It's a great aspect ratio. So it's not 16:9, but it's very close, which means your footage that you watch fills the OLED panel the proper way. Very little bars and so forth, which we got to talk about with the Z Fold 5. But in general, this is the typical high-end flagship smartphone display. But when we come into the Z Fold 5, we come into a new era of displays because you have this front display, which is yielding a very awkward, tall aspect ratio and skinny, which is going to yield to very different viewing experiences when it comes to content from, this perspective of the 16:9 and so forth. And then you can unfold this into this larger main display. This is the display that Samsung is really focused on. And this thing is phenomenal. This thing is beautiful. It's bright. It's just great to use on a day-to-day basis. The only thing is the aspect ratio is a bit funky when it comes to the inner main display as well, from watching content and having black bars top or bottom. And even when you go into landscape watching content, having bars from top to bottom. I'll display this for you guys in just a second. So on the Z Fold, if I were to use it in its normal aspect ratio, look at that. This is the normal viewing experience on the Z Fold 5. Now, if I flip it to landscape, it gets more familiar and closer to what we are used to. But obviously, with the iPhone, if I flip to the very same landscape, we get a more familiar experience. Still got some bars, but nowhere near the bar ratio that's found on the Z Fold 5. So that's something to keep in mind from a viewer perspective, and also considering the fact that this is the typical way that you hold the Z Fold 5, which means this would probably be the typical, aspect viewership. Of course, you want to flip it this way to get the best viewership. But in general, you can see both of these panels look great. They look very good. They're very crisp. They're very clear. They're very true to what you are watching, especially if you flip the Samsung displays to natural setting versus vivid. I avoid vivid at all costs. Natural is more closer to like the P3 gamut that you're getting out of the 15 Pro Max in comparison to the Z Fold 5. And speaking of these displays, we're talking about a 6.7-inch display versus a 7.6-inch display. Now, the pixel density is only 373 on the Z Fold 5 versus the iPhone's 460 ppi, which means you're going to yield a crisper, more detailed visual on the 15 Pro Max versus the Z Fold 5. Is it enough to make me be like, I'm just leaning one way over the other? Right now, honestly, looking with the naked eye at these two images, I would accept both. But I got to be honest, the 15 Pro Max definitely has an edge. And this is HDR, and we have a higher peak nit brightness on the 15 Pro Max versus the Z Fold, and also the color representation and the reality. Like, I just feel like there's more contrast and depth to the colors versus on the Z Fold 5, you can just see the lack of contrast when you compare to the 15 Pro Max. So it's just something to keep in mind. But both very valid OLED and display panels. And as you can see, this is what I'm talking about when I mention the funky aspect ratios, that tall aspect ratio, which yields such aggressive barring when you're watching typical 16:9 content. As you guys can see, bar ratios are very much different between these two devices. So it's obvious you can get a more than ideal visual experience with either one of these devices. The experience is what's different, considering the fact that you have a nice, massive 7.6-inch main display on the Z Fold 5 versus just the typical 6.7-inch on the 15 Pro Max. Let's talk about platform. These are two very different platforms, two very different realities when it comes to how you experience a smartphone. Considering the fact that if you look on my Z Fold 5, it's very much customized. I'm not using One UI, which is the native launcher that comes with the Z Fold 5. I'm using Nova Launcher because Nova Launcher allows me the customization that I prefer. Look at all the icons I have. I have them all laid down nice and neat at the bottom. Let me show you guys this for you iPhone users who don't know about the world of customization on Droid, or you considering the Samsung. You see, it seems as if I only have so many icons, but if I swipe up, these are folders. They're hidden. They're super fire, and this is the way that I'm able to get more out of less. I got a minimal setup, a minimal home screen, but maximum utility. Love that about the experience with Android platform and a foldable device. Now, when it comes to the iPhone, it's the same grid that we've known for years. The only thing I would prefer, and this is something for Apple to consider, allow us to place icons wherever we want on the grid. Or maybe if you don't want to do that, right? Which I don't see why not. Because that way I would be able to bring my icons down to the bottom and leave a space at the top. And the reason why I like that is because this is where it's easier to access. So on my Androids with devices getting larger, I put all these icons, I put them down at the bottom. I got them stacked there, I got my folders, and I got easy access to where my thumb is. On the iPhone, since everything is nudged to the top, you have to know your acrobatics when it comes to devices. So that's a reason why it would be nice to get that type of customization on the iOS platform. These are two different worlds in the sense that you got the Android One UI Samsung world versus the Apple iPhone iOS experience. They're very much different, but very much the same in the sense that you can handle a lot of the same tasks on one or the other. It's just gonna be done differently. The gestures are very much different in the iOS platform versus the gestures on Android, but there are gestures to do the same to similar actions on both platforms. It's really just two interpretations of the exact same world, if that makes sense. But you have the A17 Pro, which is out kicking butt just as much as the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, which is out and kicking butt. Both of these devices perform extremely well from a performance, optimization, and efficiency standpoint. Now, that's gonna lead us into the next hot topic, which is gonna be battery life. So ironically enough, these two devices basically have the same size battery, with the Z Fold 5 rocking a 4,400 milliamp hour battery versus the iPhone 15 Pro Max's 4,441 milliamp hour internal battery. So you would think with them having the same to similar size battery, the battery life would be the same between these two. It's not that case. And the fun fact is the 15 Pro Max is still evolving in the battery department since it's so fresh and new. But with the Z Fold 5, you're running two different panels, and one is larger with a lot more pixels to drive, and it's super bright. You pair that up with a hyperactive user or a productivity hog, you're gonna be able to pull on this battery. But my one truth about it is you can make it through your workday. Generally, now, depending on how you use your device, because battery life is 100,000% subjective, that can change. As with the 15 Pro Max, which is still optimizing, we're only a week and some change in, and we got some updates to go, the battery life is actually pretty decent. It's actually pretty fire, except if you start doing those extensive tasks. Like if I'm out shooting a bunch of ProRes log, if I have a long FaceTime conversation with my bros in our group chat, you know, they can get extensive. Those are the days that I'm gonna pull on this battery and drain it far more than if I'm just having my typical daily use. But I'm in the early stages. I'm testing a lot. I'm shooting a lot. I'm running that battery to the ground. But on the days I've had a few calm days, I've seen it extend to typical Pro Max battery life. So in reality, I think we all know that the 15 Pro Max is gonna yield a better battery life experience than the Z Fold 5. But I can say this, I'm proud of where the Z Fold 5 has come, but I'm looking forward to where it's going. Hopefully bigger battery and better efficiency, obviously. All right, so the next thing to do is to fold this bad boy up, flip this bad boy around, and go check out these cameras head to head. You know how I do. I go outside and I show you the truth. Whew. Front-facing camera, super bright day. Super bright sun right here to my right. I'm using Pro Video mode on the Z Fold 5. And then I'm using ProRes log for now. Front-facing camera with the iPhone 15 Pro Max. Basically, I'm offering the best that they have to offer. I should have used the Pro Video app on the iPhone, but you know, not everyone's gonna want to use that app. So maybe I keep it fair and just use ProRes normal video app versus Pro Video app that's built in natively on the Samsung Z Fold 5. All right, so these are the main and best lenses on each of these devices. We got the 15 Pro Max's wide angle lens suited and booted in a Pro Video camera app using the Blackmagic Cam app, so I can control all of the settings the same way I'm doing on the Z Fold 5 and its native Pro Video app. But at the end of the day, which quality is the quality? Now, I was very, very, very impressed with the Z Fold 5's camera performance when I did it in the versus against the S23 Ultra. And I'm sure I'm gonna be as impressed, if not even more impressed, with how it puts up a fight with the iPhone 15 Pro Max, which obviously is, you know, it's getting all of the love at this current moment, and rightfully so. And now we have the beloved ultra wide lens, which is not only an ultra wide lens, but it also acts as the macro lens. What's the collective looking like?
Let me know down in the comment section below. So obviously when it comes to the telephoto, we have 5x versus 3x. So quite a difference in reach, as you guys can see, but that's not what this is about. Which one has the better quality? Hit the comment section down below and let me know. Now these are white shoes hitting direct sunlight, so we see how these lenses handle the challenge. All right, so with Apple giving us ProRes log, I want to send a challenge out to Samsung, because you guys already have the native Pro Video app, which is a one-up on Apple, but you guys can go even further and give us a log profile the same way that Apple has, because you're going to allow us, people like me who complain about Samsung's, processing and image processing, you're going to allow me to take over. You're going to allow me to add or not add the sharpening that I don't want. You get me? By Apple unlocking this ProRes log, they're really in tune with the creative in the smartphone world, the camera creative, the video creative, the people like me. And I just need the same thing for Samsung, so I'm sending that challenge out because this is heat, and I know a Samsung log will look just as good, if not maybe even better. Let me know, prove me wrong, Samsung.
All right, so you guys just saw the camera performance between the two. Hit the comment section down below and let me know, where do you think the better camera performance lies? Now in the Samsung world, I do tend to have gripes with their image processing, but I eliminated that by using Pro Video mode. Now I didn't use Pro Photo mode when I took those photos, which I wish I should have. Dang, why didn't you do that, CJ? I just showed you guys on both of them, the auto app. In comparison, the iPhone has a far better auto mode, image processing. But on both of these devices, I'll prefer using a Pro Video app and a Pro Camera app, because once I take over, I'm able to really bring out what these cameras can truly do. As you guys saw in the footage that I showed you guys, especially in the video, I put the best of the best that these have to offer and put them head to head. So let me know who won. Now, let's get into the next topic, which is the most important topic, and it's really the topic I wanted to discuss between these two devices, and that's user experience. User experience, user experience. Boy, what a difference in user experience offered between these two devices. Let me start off with the Z Fold 5, because this is an exciting, innovative way to use a smartphone. The fact that I can take what is this size, fold it down to this size, and carry it with me. And if you add in the S Pen, so basically I have a stylus experience, I'm really taking it to the productivity level that I don't think many familiar phones can do in comparison to the way that this device can do. The visual experience, going through, PDF documents, or just experiencing things that are like page-like on here, reading a book, things like that. Just that tablet experience that you're being given here, and allowing it to be portable because you can take it here. Now, when we go into the front, main, non-main, I'm sorry, it's not the main, but it technically is, because this is the one you're gonna interact with probably the most. Things are a little bit different in the experience because it's capable and it fulfills and acts just like this does, or just like this does, meaning there's no difference. You do have the ability to customize them and separate them, but at the end of the day, the truth is you can use your device in full from this panel the same you can from this panel. That's the plus, because you can have two different experiences, or you can have the same experience. It's all choice and preference, but in the same right, you're carrying a little bit more with you. It's a little thicker and heftier than just dealing with this. And so much so from a technical standpoint, when it comes to weight, we have 221 grams with the 15 Pro Max versus the hefty 253 grams with the Z Fold 5. And these hand to hand, you definitely can feel the weight distribution and the difference, as well as the thickness, you guys. Look at these two in comparison. And I saved this for this section of user experience versus just me talking about design, is because this is contributing to your user experience in the sense that you're carrying around what's essentially the thickness of two smartphones, the weight of a very heavy flagship phone in this, package. So it's like, Are you willing to compromise the convenience of something that's slender, a little bit lighter, actually a nice amount lighter, and familiar? And let's be real here. This isn't no slack or light or simpler to carry, but I think just because it's more slender, it's more comfortable in a pocket. The bulge and the presence of the Z Fold 5 is far greater than the 15 Pro Max in the pocket from a user experience standpoint. But if you could get past that, if you could get past the fact that your outer panel is on the slender side and has a funky aspect ratio, if you get past the fact that you typically are gonna have to unfold this device for the true experience, if you get past the fact of the thickness and the weight, you can experience something that's far more innovative than the typical smartphone experience. And it's a great experience from my perspective. Now, if we get into the 15 Pro Max, this is the familiar. This is, what we know and have used in all of these years. And this is where some people are finding themselves a bit bored. If you are one of those people who are always like, oh, it's the same phone, yawn, 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 and you're like wanting something different to experience, that's where the Z Fold 5 comes into play to give you a different world. But for those who are looking for the familiar and the refined, that's the beauty to this device, is it's had so many refinements over the years that it's a well-oiled machine with little to no hiccups in comparison to this, which is so new and so fresh and still has a good amount of refinements to go for it to land into the everyday consumer. Now, there are other companies doing this in a more innovative and forward-thinking perspective in reference to the consumer, but those are all concepts in growing, development. This one is where it looks like Samsung has landed, and they're just expanding and refining it until hopefully it becomes something that the everyday user can experience, because the everyday user is more comfortable, more familiar, and more at home with an using experience of the 15 Pro Max. And this year, this user experience on the iPhone 15 Pro Max has went that much greater, that much more involved, especially for the camera. The camera image processing this year is bar none. The camera video processing this year is unmatched. And when we get into just the iOS 17 user experience and some of the new features with the action button, which is fire, when combined with shortcuts, it just expands on that user experience. I know Android users are gonna be like, oh, such and such did it first and so forth, but that button is no longer current. And at this point, it is here with the iPhone, and it's able to expand the iOS user experience. But when I use this device, I'm using what's familiar and what's typical to me, but what's also refined. When I use this device, I'm using something that just for me is familiar because I'm a tech forward person, but this is something different. This is something innovative, and this is something next level. Ooh. You technology snobs, I done just about had it with all of y'all. Listen, duck.
New watch, no diamonds, no watch, good timing, yeah. New watch, no diamonds, no watch, good timing, yeah. Need no middleman, I'm the man, send it in. I like what I like, me, I know my rights, is sipping in. I like having fun, I do what I want, it's what it is. For my son and son, for my daughters, yeah, it's for my twin. I work through the night.